Hello, everyone, and thank you all so much for joining us today as we are talking with the 2023 Jasmine Awards winners. My name's Jessie Rosenberg from the Fragrance Foundation UK, and today let's talk about fragrance. So one of the biggest challenges within the fragrance industry is communicating scents effectively. So how do we cross that barrier? How do we cross that screen that's in the way and really connect the scent to people? Today, as I said, we're lucky to be joined with the 2023 Jasmine Award winners who are experts in translating smells. They're going to provide some insights into how we can successfully communicate with audiences by breaking down jargon and focusing on the themes that matter. So we are joined by Alistair Park, who is the winner of our Literary Award, Sally Hughes, who's the winner of the Creativity Award, Susie Nightingale, winner of the Practical Guide Award, and Tara Ledden, our Rising Star Award winner. A big thank you to you, all of you, for joining us today. I'm so excited for our discussion. The Q&A area is open for all of you that are watching, so please feel free to send in questions and we will try to answer as many as possible at the end, but we may run out of time, in which case you can get in touch with us after the event. Okay, we're going to jump right in if that's okay with all of you. I would love to know more about your approaches to translating scents, because it must be a challenge to capture the nuances of scent through words, through images. So Alice, we're going to start with you. Do you read up about the brand or do you blind smell? What approach do you take? And what was your favorite way to approach the task of translating scents?
Okay, first of all, good morning, Jessie. Hi, everyone. I feel like we should have a glass of wine with us. Although it's pretty early. I'm on the Strepsil, so excuse the sexy low voice. Um, and welcome everyone who's watching. I know lots of friends and industry pals are in the audience, so good morning. I think that over the years, especially in sort of the past sort of 3 or 4 years when I've really focused on this, my thinking when I smell something has gone so much more objective than subjective. And I don't really think about, oh, do I like it or not? That's almost one of the last questions that I ask myself. Um, if I'm discovering a new brand and a new fragrance, I'll immediately look at the sort of credibility and the world around the brand first, rather than even start thinking about the fragrances. Um, who made it? What's the company behind it? What's the heritage? What's the story? What's the purpose? Why is this brand coming into life? If it's extremely sustainable, what's the point in making it here? If you're going to be, all high and mighty about this, what's your contribution to this industry? How are you going to bring some joy to people that's different to what's out there that already exists? So first of all, I sort of look at the brand more overall, a bit like that. And then when I'm smelling things, I don't think about myself, whether I like it or not. I think to myself, who in my audience or who do I know who might like this type of fragrance? Is it for a certain generation? Is it a taste, a sort of flavor that somebody will really like? I really try and immediately sort of put it into a hand holding zone of, if you like this, you're going to love this. I try and sort of put it in a category where I know people will really like something specific. And then I sort of, yeah, I kind of go down almost like a little chart of what's the brand about, what's this fragrance saying, what's the message, and who's going to like it. That's sort of how my brain works. I don't know if anyone else has that same sort of plan of thought.
I think
How
that's really interesting, kind of the overall approach, because I think there are so many brands out there. So how can you really find, what that brand is putting out there and the meaning behind it? Sally, what would you say your approach is like to translating scents?
Well, there are lots of things that Alice is talking about where I would agree. I do the same thing. I always want to know about the brand. I want to know who the perfumer is. I want to know why it exists in the world and all of that. The only place where we differ is that I am massively subjective because that is my job. I'm a columnist. So my type of journalism, although I have been a third person journalist when I was younger, I have only written in the first person for the past 15 years. And so when you write in the first person, your job is to be subjective. But that does not mean that I don't talk about things I don't like. I do all the time. I don't have to like something to focus on it. However, I won't be neutral about it. I will still say, look, I don't like it. To me, it's too sweet, or everybody who I work with in perfumery knows that I hate sweet. I just hate gourmand perfumes. They do something to me chemically that makes me feel nauseous. However, there's no way I'm going to ignore such an important and creative and fun and interesting category of perfume. So I have to find a way around that. So I will talk about gourmands and say, look, I could never wear this, but I would love my house to smell of this, or I would love to be friends with the woman who smells of this. So I will still talk about them, but I can't be neutral in my language, because that is the opposite of my job.
That's really, really interesting. Two sides of kind of approaches there. And I think what's kind of amazing about the world of fragrances is we see trends kind of come up, and and consumers, audiences, ourselves can be swayed by those trends that we see. So how can you explore trends in kind of new and dynamic ways? And Susie, your winning piece last year, you wrote about kind of the fruit and vegetable trends that we saw. So how did you find that approach of tackling a trend as big as that?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to trace where trends come from. And for me, it's often finding out that perfumers have got their hands on a new ingredient, they've found a new way of distilling things, and obviously they get excited about those, and those eventually filter down to fragrances that we can all go and buy. But when they first emerge, they can be quite unusual. So I think when vegetable fragrances, for example, and cauliflower was an ingredient, I immediately thought, oh, do I want to smell of a sort of school dinner kitchen? And it's trying to get across that sort of where the trend has come from, but then also how that then translates into a fragrance, how it is used, how it actually smells, because that's what people are interested in at the end of the day. While it's really interesting for us in the industry to go really nerdy into where the trends have come from, what people want to know is, how is it going to smell? Why should I go and smell this? And also to let them know that some of the ingredients, I think, can be quite off-putting to people. We have so many opinions about them before we've smelled them. So my job as a writer, and I'm lucky enough to have lots of pages to do that within, I often get to write 8-page articles, which is really unheard of anywhere else, really. So I can really go into the nuances, and I can go from tracing a trend, where it's come from, talking to the perfumers, how they like to use it, how they would describe it, and then translating that into a more consumer friendly approach about, well, how does it smell to me? How do I think I can get this across to people so that they're excited and they want to go and find those ingredients. They want to go and smell those fragrances in store.
Amazing. It's a real kind of dissection of the whole journey of fragrance, kind of from the development stage almost right through to what we're seeing on shelves that are, trending. And Tara, how would you say your approach?
Can I just say something about trends really, really quickly? I do think it's quite important. Obviously, please do go to Tara, but I don't want to speak on behalf of everyone, but I suspect we all feel the same. For me, a trend is an opportunity usually to let people know about a thing that's existed for ages that they may not have been interested in before. So Susie talking about vegetal fragrances, yes, there may be a load of new ones, but I would, and I suspect Susie and Alice and Tara would think, oh, that's a chance for me to speak about Eau de Campagne from Sisley, and it's
Exactly.
for decades. And so trends are not about what's new, it's about exploiting and capitalizing on the new interest that people have, and the opportunity for bringing to the fore a fragrance you love so much that's never going to be talked about otherwise.
Exactly. Yeah. And in my article, that's exactly what I did. So yeah, it's really exciting to talk about, for example, the new L'Artisan, the Potager collection, and the Bouli collection, where they focused on vegetables. But then to go back and say, well, actually, tomato leaf has been around for a very long time in fragrances, and those sort of cucumbery notes really weird notes that on their own sound so peculiar, but that we all have an understanding of, because we can actually go and smell those, which I think is really rare in perfumery as well. We very rarely get a chance to go and smell, Rose Otto on its own, or vetiver on its own, whereas we can relate to, rubbing a tomato leaf and smelling it and really enjoying that smell, and then tracing that back through history, perfumers who've used that in really interesting ways, and why is it now trending again?
It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating, and a real power of storytelling as well, to be able to connect the dots and, like you say, trace it back to history. I think that's really important. Thank you, Sally, for that. And Tara, what would you say your approach is like to translating scents? Are you someone similar to kind of Sally in her approach, where you kind of take a more subjective look at things, or are you trying to kind of direct and guide through brand discovery?
I think it's really a mix of both. I'm in a lucky position where I do a lot of first person writing and third person writing. So they both come into it. And I think, similar to what Sally was saying about trends and evoking old ingredients and perfumes, I think I also look at a lot of the cultural context. Like, you could see skin scents becoming huge in the pandemic. The perfumers would have been working on those 2, 5, even longer, more years ahead. And then we say, oh, these are massive because we're not leaving the house and we don't need bold fragrances, which won't have been in the mind of the perfumers when they were making them, but it is a reason as to why people would shop them. So I think it's also looking about what's happening in the world, popular references, and then, contrary to what Susie might have 8 pages, I generally have 2, sometimes just 1. So I'm really looking at how I can put that across in a much lower word count. Like, I might have 1,000 words. So it's really picking the main points, but also like getting the history in the most concise and approachable way, where it's not confusing to somebody who's maybe not interested in perfume in the same way I am.
Amazing. And a theme actually that you talked about in speaking about kind of cultural references in your approaches, you talked about affordability, which obviously was a massive kind of topic last year with cost of living, and obviously still is. So how do you tackle that approach and kind of in your writing? Why was it important for you to kind of approach it in that theme?
For that article in particular, the one I run Rising Star for, came out of a discussion we had in the office about affordable scents and this misconception about how they're like cheap and nasty and cause rashes, or they don't last. And that's just not the case anymore. And I think there's a lot of, I guess, myth busting or education that people aren't familiar with. And when you are in the industry, so I'm in a magazine office and people are saying that, you're very aware that then that is what the mass of people think. And I think also, personally, for me, perfume is such an everyday luxury, and I think a lot of people see it as a really expensive hobby, or like you have to have a lot of money to have a collection, which just isn't the case. So I think it's really the affordability point, while it really has come into its own since the pandemic and the cost of living crisis, I think it's also just a testament to the perfumers, the perfume houses, the brands making the affordable scents, that they've really come on and now compete with those high price tag scents, and that itself makes them worth talking about regardless of the economic climate.
Mm. And Alice, you also wrote about kind of the affordability and focused on the kind of economic side of fragrances. What challenges did you find when you wrote your piece?
The challenge that I found was that on our side of things, we have lots of PR agencies and lots of PRs who represent lots of beautiful brands, predominantly luxury brands. There are very few great agencies who are championing or supporting or representing those sort of mid-priced, affordable fragrance brands. Great for skincare and makeup, there's loads of that, but for some reason, everyone has the ick for affordable fragrances. And it sort of blows my mind, because what Tara said was so, like, you really nailed it there. There was this moment of this cost of living. We've all come out of lockdown. We'd like to just wear a nice perfume every day, not the most expensive thing on our shelves. And it almost seems like one huge side of our industry just wasn't listening at all. I'm finding that in candles as well. Loads of lovely luxury candles out there. But actually, when I speak to people, and I have a focus group of many thousands of people who talk to me every day about what they want something lovely, credible, good quality, but not so expensive that they feel guilty spraying or lighting a candle that's in that luxury market every single day. They want that sort of everyday loveliness, like they have with their makeup and their skincare and their clothes and everything like that. But for some reason, fragrance and now candles just hasn't got the backing of the agency PR side of our industry. I don't know anyone who's grabbing Scent Eval or anyone who's, bigging up some of these affordable fragrance brands on the same level of interest as luxury brands. I don't understand what the problem is there. So I think my piece was just fueled out of sort of mild rage, but also just calling out the ick that people have. And actually, most of the perfumes that we talk about that are credible and affordable are made by the same people that are luxury and expensive and fabulous. We all know that. So that was, I think, what Tara and I tried to do in our pieces, was to just do a little bit of gentle education. I don't mean that in a patronizing way, but almost sort of behind the candelabra moment of, actually, they're all made by the same people, and let's just clear our minds of this sort of dirty secret that no one really likes to talk about, and actually let's make it cool and desirable, in the same way that skincare brands like The Ordinary, The Inkey List, all of that have become cool to talk about, yet affordable fragrance isn't cool to talk about. So my piece was mostly fueled from irritation and also deep rage at how a lot of luxury perfumes don't last, yet they are fine to put a price tag that is absurd, and that's not okay. It's okay if you're spending 12 quid on Nivea Sun that's not going to last longer than 20 seconds. Who cares? It's delicious. It's suntan lotion in a bottle. It's a moment of joy. But if you're putting something at £200 plus that's not going to last on your skin, I will rip you to shreds, and I'm very happy to do that. So that was sort of the messaging and the reason behind the piece, and just to explore how great some of these affordable brands are, and to spread the word.
Also, just to add on to what Alice has said there, I didn't speak about it, but I think also a lot of the more affordable options are only available online, or they're in stores without testers, and the access to them is really hard. So I think it's also really important we're in a privileged position where we have access to those things, and we want to educate our readers, our followers, on these perfumes that are much less risk if you're buying blind online, where you can't smell them. As Alice said, spending £10-20 is much easier if you don't like it than spending hundreds of pounds.
And I think often those brands are really unloved in stores as well. They're sort of at the back or low down on a dusty shelf somewhere. So I think something that we all do is try and really spread our suggestions across all price ranges, and always make sure that we're including affordable fragrances, because that's what we go and buy ourselves as well. And you'll often see us ferreting around in Boots and Superdrug and having a look at what's out there, because as Alice said, and I think that's a really important point, we have to go and find it. We're not going to have a PR coming and telling us, oh, there's this really exciting new affordable range. And it's often watching people, what they're talking about on TikTok, on Instagram, and really doing our research every single day, keeping our eye on the ball, and what are people talking about? Oh, that's an interesting range, I haven't heard of them, and going and finding it, not just waiting things for press releases to hit your emails.
I think because so many, and it's a generalization, but because of the bulk buying power of raw ingredients, so many of the really great affordable fragrances are own brand in a store, right? Yeah. And so because of that, those fragrances are made by proper people with proper ingredients. You end up with great fragrances, but because they're seen by the stores as just another revenue stream, they're given to the in-house PR team or a PR agency that are fashion PRs. They are fashion PRs. They don't know anything about fragrance, and they'd be the first to admit it. And so while if you're writing about luxury fragrance, you can talk to a Jason Waterworth, or you can talk to a Michael Booker, or you could, you can talk to really senior beauty PRs with a specific passion for fragrance. If you want to talk about a high street fragrance, usually I bypass the PR and go to the shop. and
Yeah.
get the blotters out, because with the best will in the world, the PR hasn't been trained in fragrance. The PR doesn't know about fragrance, and that is because the store itself doesn't take fragrance seriously beyond, oh, it's something else someone can buy at the checkout while
Mhm.
they're waiting to pay for their skirt. And so the storytelling aspect of it is missing from affordable fragrances, and that has a knock-on effect in how much the public know about these fragrances. And that's a real shame, because the demand for those fragrances is huge. People don't have £200, £250 to spend on all their fragrances, but they do have a great interest and passion in smelling great.
Yeah.
Like, what's the problem? And I think, you know, I think the issue is very often brands and retailers not taking the fragrance side of their business seriously enough to take the care over training and the recruitment of PR people.
Education through, you know, all stages is so important, and I think that's why what you all do and Jasmine Award winners previous have do amazingly is go out and they look and they find the important things that people that are looking for fragrances, wanting to understand more about fragrances, and you will present it in a way that is so digestible and you know, approachable for us to understand more about the industry. And I think it's so important that we are all learning more and more, and finding little nuggets of fragrances here and there that are going to be perfect for us and our price range and what we're after. The power of scent is just so undeniable. And for all of you as well, in the way that you communicate and the different forms you use, you know, Susie, you have a podcast, and Alice, you have amazing on your Instagram, and Sally as well. You know, it's about kind of creativity in exploring scents. So what freedoms, Sally, I'm going to come to you because you were our winner of the Creativity Award last year. What freedoms do you think there are in using something like a reel or using voiceovers in your form of communication when talking about scents? Or are there any challenges that present themselves of using these formats?
Yes, there are lots of challenges. The easiest thing to make on Instagram is long form content where you're talking to camera. That's the easiest thing to do. It requires the least editing. It's really fun to do. I have a mix of short form and long form. My followers love long form more than most people's followers do, and I think that's probably true of all of us. It's a kind of fragrancy thing, you know. My followers like a proper chat. However, the algorithm favors short form, so you know you have to mix things up a bit. There are lots of challenges. The people don't realize that short videos are much more labor intensive than long video. So the Perfume Diaries, for example, which is what I won this Jasmine Award for, are an absolute bloody pain in the neck. So they take hours and hours and hours of editing, and that's how, after you've got all the footage. You never have enough footage to keep up with your voice, so you always need to say more words than you have footage of. So there've been many a times, and I'm not joking, at 3 a.m, I've got out of bed, I've taken out the blouse I was wearing on the day I shot the footage, I've laid it on the bed, and I've put the perfume bottle on the blouse because I'm 3 seconds short of footage. Like, it happens all the time. Or I've kind of, you know, had to go through my phone and try and find some footage of a train moving so I can slot that in. You know, it's really, really hard to fill the reel with enough content and keep the shots moving and to keep up with your voice. I don't think people realize how hard they are. So sometimes, a fragrance diary will take me longer than any other type of content. However, within that, there are huge freedoms. So I can talk much more roundly about where would I wear this kind of fragrance and why. So, for example, explaining to people that if I'm going to the Estee Lauder breast cancer awareness event, of course I'm going to wear Clinique because it's a Lauder brand and that's polite. And I think it's polite that you wear a brand's fragrance to the event. And so I can talk about that a little bit. If I'm going to a big event that I'm hosting, I'm going to wear Chanel's Coco because that's a shit kicker of a fragrance, and I'm going to feel together and I'm going to feel ready. I'm not going to wear a soft, pretty floral. So the visual context of the kind of vlog format, I suppose, of the Perfume Diaries allows me, I think, to inhabit the world of the viewer more. Not that they're hosting events for Chanel or whatever it is, but I can get more into their mindset of, I'm doing this, and therefore this will make me feel like this, and this will make me feel like this. And this is a polite fragrance. This is a gentle fragrance. This will give me confidence. And it allows me to do that, which I love. I think that's a real honor. But they are incredibly labor intensive. So I have to try and kind of mix them up with long form. Long form is definitely the easiest because you can say what you want. You're not having to stick to time. And also the editing's much easier. You only have to take out, you know, a sneeze or something. But basically you're just kind of chatting along. So that's definitely the easiest. But the algorithm likes short. So you've got to try and please the people you've got and expand the reach you have simultaneously, which is difficult.
Finding those forms. And Alice, for you, what would you say?
I have to say my nemesis is probably automated captions, because I do, like Sally, a bit of a mix of sort of maybe some 15-minute things and then some shorter, sort of 4 to 5 minutes. And on those shorter ones, you can actually, I don't know what's happened with Instagram, but you can now caption something that's a little bit longer than 1.5 minutes. You used to try and do that for something that was 4 minutes, and the whole thing would literally go like explode into flames, and it just didn't work. Now you can get automated captions for slightly longer video content, but my God, I speak quite quickly, so I'm very particular. Like, if anyone's ever received a WhatsApp or text from me, my punctuation, my spelling is extremely important. Like, I won't cut corners there, and therefore my automated captions have to be spot on. My background is as a journalist. If I'm gonna make a spelling, if automated captions screw something up, I will go in and edit it and change it. But you have to keep going in and saving it and going in and pressing done and going in multiple times, and it takes forever. And it takes longer than any of the research and the filming and the editing I've done. And actually it is quite funny in the end. I'm sitting there trying to correct my own waffle, writing things in, you know, I mean, God, some of the brand names and the names of the fragrances are absurd. So you have to go in and really spell them correctly. And I'm quite meticulous about that because I have pride in my work, and it's of a quality that I hope is high enough that warrants speaking to you guys on a screen like this. So that's important to me personally, professionally, but that's my challenge, is automated captions, that you can't just take the whole thing, edit it in one single go and relay it. You have to just keep going in, because the minute your finger touches the screen, it loses everything. And anyway, it's just a sort of in-app thing that drives me mad. But I now block off considerable moments of time to do that in, because it always takes longer than you think it's going to. But generally, I think no one's taught us how to do this. We've had to figure it out ourselves. There's no fabulous masterclass on how to make great reels that there are now, but there weren't a few years ago when we were all hustling and figuring this out. We all had to teach ourselves. So I think all of us are quite sort of proud of ourselves that we've figured this out. Like the other day I saw Sally had done a long form that went over 15 minutes. I said, pal, how did you do that? Like, how did you get past that threshold? And you really kindly like gave me a step by step, and now I know how to do it. This is what we do within our little community. It's not bitchy like makeup and skincare. We're really nice to each other. We help each other out a lot, and all the tricks we learn and all the sort of new things that we're doing. Like, I tried a little voiceover thing the other day, inspired by all of us doing fragrance content, and we help each other out. And I think that I'm very happy in this little perfume pals world that we can do that with each other. Sorry, I went off on a tangent. Sorry.
No, I think it's that, I mean, a lovely tangent. But what kind of comes through then, and what you're saying, is that the words themselves are obviously so important, in that you take the time to edit it and make sure that if it's in a voiceover or if it's in a caption, that those words are representative of the discussion that you're having, or the information that you're putting out. And so sometimes in the world of fragrance, we you know, there's a lot of jargon, and it's, you know, for the general consumer, how can they understand some of the jargon that we're all familiar with? So that's also a challenge, I think, for a lot of translating smells. And I guess my question would be then is, how do you find breaking down the jargon, and what ways do you approach talking about scents or writing about scents? And Tara, I just kind of as an aside from the questions, what would you say is your approach to breaking down that jargon?
I think how I do it is not necessarily thinking about what's in the bottle, what the notes are, what is on the press release or the product description, but thinking about how it makes you feel or who it reminds you of. I think Alice was talking about this earlier, like thinking about who else would wear that, whether it's a fictional character, like I think I wrote like Barbie or James Bond, or it could be, you know, a grandmother, a mother, a sister, putting them in making them into people, thinking about smells or flavors. It's really hard to say vetiver and for people to know what that smells like. So thinking about, yeah, the emotions behind it and just using a lot of metaphors and making it really approachable that way and building a whole picture, because it's not often we smell something that's not a perfume in everyday life and don't have a picture or a texture or something to go with it. It's not, smell isn't like an isolated sense. We always have something to back it up. So I think building that picture becomes really helpful in translating what a perfume smells like.
No, absolutely.
Yeah,
And actually,
totally agree.
yeah, is there anything you wanted to add, Susie, on to break?
Yeah, I think it is such a challenge talking about what something smells like, because we have to liken it to something else. There aren't individual languages that are devoted just to smells. The only context is, you know, that something smells disgusting, or so you've got to liken it to a texture or a character or a piece of music or temperature or a place you've been, or like Tara was saying, a character that you can liken it to. And I think that is really helpful for people to get an immediate sense of, is it soft, is it spiky, is it hot, is it cold, is it calming, is it energizing? So something that we all do in the various different ways that we talk about fragrance is try and jump over the screen to that person and get them to start imagining things. And obviously you can only do that to a certain extent, because everyone's sense of smell is different. We might all have different contexts and cultural associations with smell. But our main thing is to get people interested enough, or think, oh yeah, that sounds interesting. We want them to go and smell it on their own skin. And that is what we're all trying to do. That's the end result of what we all try and do. And I know that it can then go into such an emotional connection for people. And I know that we all, certainly I've spoken to Alice and Sally, we get such emotional responses from my podcast listeners, from the people who watch you on Instagram, the people who read the articles. And it's quite extraordinary, you know, going back to that overarching theme of the power of fragrance, and that it can move people incredibly. It can change their lives. And yeah, I think that's something that I only really had a direct connection with when I started broadcasting, because as a writer, you're sat there and you type away and you send your piece off and you see it in print, and then you're on to the next 20 things that you're writing about. When you're broadcasting or when you're using social media, you have a direct connection with your audience. And so you can hear immediately what they think about things. And I think that's a really interesting, really exciting new thing that, yeah, I've kind of had to learn as I go along.
That's amazing.
I think when it comes to talking about fragrance, what I have always felt, what I felt as a reader, what I feel as a journalist and as a broadcaster, is the pyramid, the fragrance pyramid, is everything that is wrong with talking about perfume. It is so pointless. It is so kind of anodyne, meaningless. It's elitist. It's lazy. It's everything I hate when people go, the top notes, the mid notes, the base notes. I know that we need that information as content creators. We kind of need to know what the thinking of the perfumer was. But in terms of communicating that, it's just utterly meaningless, because we all know that an amber rose fragrance can smell literally 2 million different ways. It's just completely pointless. And all anybody really cares about is the emotions it will evoke in them. So they want to know how it feels, what it will remind them of. And I think when I started at The Guardian in particular, fragrance writing had been like that, the flipping pyramid, for such a long time. And people were kind of appalled by the way I wrote about fragrances. I remember there was one time The Guardian took out a line I'd written about a fragrance smelling like a rich woman's knickers, and they just took it out, and it's like, but you know what I mean. You won't
Yes,
know what
please.
you won't know what I mean if I write that it's rose and whatever. It's completely meaningless. Rose can mean it smells like a flower shop, or it smells like a temple, or it means a million different things. And so you just have to take someone somewhere familiar to explain the unfamiliar, I think. And so if you say, it's like a broken powder compact in the bottom of a suede handbag, people know what that smells like.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so
Creating those stories.
you have to take an unfamiliar thing and you have to take them somewhere familiar where they go, oh yeah, I love that smell. Oh, I can't be doing with that smell, or whatever. You have to take them somewhere they recognize. Because otherwise, because the thing about talking about perfume is, if you talk about makeup, you're talking about art. If you're talking about skincare, you're talking about science. But when you're talking about fragrance, you're talking about air. You're describing air. It's like the hardest thing in the world. But I do think that most of us would say that we like it because it's hard.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, yeah, I love it because it's complicated.
Yeah.
For years, lots of editors that I would pitch to say, God, could you do a fragrance review, because I hate writing about fragrance. And I'd be like, lovely, thank you, I'll take that. Love writing about that, because totally echoing everything that Sally and Susie have just said. Who knows what vetiver smells like? What? But and I'm going to use Jo Fairley's example here. If you imagine a potato sack, there you are. You know that it's sort of filthy and a bit earthy and, maybe a little bit fresh as well. And it's got that sort of PTE vibe to it. That's that sort of, or like patchouli has a kind of damp cardboard thing about it. And so if you use these references, these metaphors and cultural references, and as you said, Susie, people, or things that most people can refer to quite quickly, then you're immediately putting them in the right direction. Because really, we just want to connect people with delicious fragrances and help them navigate the medieval meat market of some of these enormous department stores, which are migraine inducing. So we just want to give them a sort of invisible hand to guide them into a much nicer, easier, more gentle little direction. That's what, hopefully we're here to do. And like Sally was saying, you say rose, it could be Bridgerton or Tim Burton. And also a lot of people just say, oh no, I don't like rose. No, absolutely hate it. Trust me, it's in every single fragrance, whether it's a seasoning or a leading note, like vanilla as well. So actually, when a press release comes, unless I know that Sally or Tara or Susie or one of my friends has written that press release and helped consult with that brand, I tend not to look at the press release. I'll refer to it if I need a fact, like if there's a twist in the story or the sort of general inspiration concept. That is almost the last thing I look at. If I already know the story about it, I'll smell it, make my own sort of flavor, texture, temperature, tonal mini vocabulary world, weird word bubble in it for myself, then refer to the press release for anything I'm sort of missing. But
yeah, completely. And that's, that's how people smell fragrance. They haven't got a press release in front of them when they're in Boots or Selfridges. So we need to recreate that feeling of smelling it for the first time and then translating that to the consumer. And often, you can get a gorgeously presented press release that's sort of like a mini novel, like a sort of mini Mills and Boon novel with beautiful pictures, and but you just want to smell it. And I think something that we are very privileged to do is blind smell things. For example, when we've been judging the Parfum Extraordinaire category, we don't know what they are. And that is one of my favorite things to do, just smelling the fragrance. What do I think of it? Where is it taking me? Is it like velvet, or is it like suede, or is it like a piece of old leather that's been left in the sun, or has that leather been buffed? Is it a really expensive handbag? Is it lipsticky? Is it powdery? Am I on holiday? Am I at home? Am I being nurtured? Am I being challenged? And those things are thrilling, and it's something that I wish people could get to do more. So I guess what we're trying to do is take away all the nonsense and just say, it's going to make you feel like this, or this is how it made me feel, and get people interested enough, excited enough to go and smell them. And as Alice was saying, as we've all said, to overcome those hurdles of feeling too scared to go into a shop and smell things, which is something that a lot of people really feel. So yeah, hopefully people feel they've gotten in when they've read one of our pieces or heard one of us talking about it.
I'm sure they do. And I think what that kind of goes to show is that there are so many different creative approaches that you can take to translating smells, and you don't have to kind of fit into a box of reading the press release and ticking the boxes of what's there. We've got a lot of questions in, so I'm going to ask one more question and then we'll go on to what has been asked. So for people that are interested into getting into the world of fragrances and translating smells, how would you encourage someone to start thinking about writing a blog or posting on Instagram? How can we enter this world of fragrance?
I feel so strongly about this because I think fragrance is intimidating to people. I think people are scared of talking about fragrance, a bit like they're scared of talking about wine because they think I don't know enough. I don't know all the stuff. And so it's not like makeup where I can put it on and go, oh, this is lovely, or whatever it is. I'm not clever enough, or I'm not knowledgeable enough, or I'm not sophisticated enough, or rich enough, or whatever it is to talk about fragrance. And I hate that. I hate that because here's the thing that nobody knows about fragrance unless you're in it. You cannot be wrong. You cannot be wrong. Because if that's what you smell, that is what you smell. And if that's how you feel, that is how you feel. And nobody can tell you you're wrong about how a fragrance makes you feel and how you experience it, because you are always right, because that is just how you experience it. And so I would really, really, really encourage people to just say how they feel about a fragrance. How does it make them feel? Where do they like wearing it? You know, what do people say to them when they're wearing it? Does it have any special memories for them? All of those things are uniquely yours. They belong to you and you cannot be wrong. And so get them down, because the other thing I hear a lot, and for similar reasons, is people will say, I really want to write. I really want to be a writer. Here's the thing, writers write. If you don't write, you're not a writer. And so if you want to be a writer, the only way to be a writer is to sit down and write things down. And then you are a writer. You may not be a professional one. You may not get paid much money or any money for it. But if you are sitting down and writing things down, you are a writer. And if you're not a writer. There is no in between. And so I would really encourage you to open your laptop or get on your phone and just think, I am definitely going to be right about how I feel about this fragrance. And I'm just going to write down my unique, truthful experiences of this fragrance. And at that point, you are a fragrance writer.
Yeah, nicely put.
Completely agree. Yeah, and I think something that's really useful to do, something that I used to do a lot with the Perfume Society and Jo Fairley, is do some blind smelling. And anyone can do that at home. You know, you can do it with your shampoo. You don't need an expensive fragrance or a candle or, you know, some basil, and line some things up. And then just take away all of the bottle and the packaging and the advertising, or oh, I don't like rose, or I don't know if that suits me, and just write down a stream of consciousness for a minute. Just write down words that come to mind. And as Sally so rightly said, you are completely right. If it takes you to Peru or if it takes you to Bognor, it doesn't matter. You're completely right. And just to get over that hurdle of thinking, oh, I don't know, I can't smell all of the ingredients. None of us can smell all of the ingredients. You know, you're not going to smell something and a list of 300 ingredients pop out like a little computer printout. It's all about how it makes you feel, and that is the most important thing to the perfumer as well. You know, they are the most experienced noses in the world. What they are trying to do is make someone feel great or interested, and that is the main thing. So yeah, just getting over that hurdle, that fear, is something that I think is so important. And just practicing, just go and write it on your, start a blog, start an Instagram, just reviewing all your own fragrances or what you smelled in the high street that day, smelled in the garden, you know, anything like that. There are so many more opportunities to do that now with social media than when we mostly started. So yeah, there's lots of avenues out there. Go and fill them with your thoughts about fragrance.
I think if one thing that we kind of have learned from this panel is go for it. There's so many different approaches you can take. The fragrance industry is vast. There's so much to talk about. So anyone watching that wants to start a blog or start talking about fragrance, you know, there's nothing holding you back. Go for it. Do take on board some of the tips that have been shared today, and share your experiences of what that fragrance makes you feel.
And also choose a platform that you really like. A lot of people say to me, "Oh, you should do YouTube." I did that with Hideous, and it doesn't work for me. It's chaos. I don't even like my kids being on YouTube, going on YouTube. I don't like the weirdness of it all. I do a bit of TikTok, but you know, Instagram just happens to be the platform that I really like because I know it very well and I've learned it as best as I can. So don't try and do the thing that makes you feel a little bit, well, like weird and uncomfortable and intimidated. Don't go and start a Facebook page if you're worried about people kind of, you know, arguing within your comments. Or find the platform that you feel comfortable on and just practice and just keep going. And if you've uploaded something and it's a little bit cheesy, it doesn't matter. You just keep going and try again. You know, it's not like we all started doing this perfectly. I'm figuring stuff out almost every day still. I just bought myself a new microphone, like these little things. That we haven't just started all of this with this enormous kind of insight and expertise. Every single week I'm learning a new little editing trick or something like that, and you just do it slowly, but do it on a platform that you feel really comfortable in, that you know well enough to play around with. And if it starts making you feel intimidated or anxious, then pull back and do something different. Start just writing in a way that is safe and calming and enjoyable for you.
There you go. Well, thank you all for joining us. We're going to answer some questions that have been asked now. The first one is about images and scent, and any tips on translating an image to scent or scent to image. How would you approach kind of that world of marketing, I suppose? Tara, what's your experience been like if you've seen an image for a fragrance and have tried to understand or decipher what that means?
I think this kind of speaks to what we were talking about earlier, whereas sometimes the imagery and the advertising can be quite confusing. You don't really know what they're trying to put across. I think it's much easier when we've smelt the scent to kind of identify why they've made that advert, or that image. When you see that first off, you kind of get, like, I think obviously, especially when it comes to like TV ads, they're very pretty. It feels expensive and rich, and it's very aspirational. Across the board, you're not going to see a TV ad which, to steal Alice's phrase, is like a bag of potatoes. Like, that's not glamorous. That's not going to be something that a brand's going to put money into. So I think they're part of a picture of learning about a perfume and learning about more what the brand wants to tell about the perfume, the story that they want behind that, what the perfumers thought about when they're making it, versus how you then put it into the cultural context. So I think it's all part of that, part of the story and part of what that perfume means. But I think it can be quite hard to discern what it's trying to say by itself.
Absolutely, thank you. And another question, Susie, I'm going to come to you for this one, is can you recommend any books, fragrance books, for somebody that's looking to start looking into fragrance, or somebody that just wants to kind of broaden their horizons in the industry?
Oh yeah, there's loads. I mean, and there's everything from, you know, really fun going through the history. Lizzie Ostrom has written a great book about fragrance that I think is great because it's going into different eras. Obviously Sally's wonderful book. But there's loads of amazing books that you can have a look at. I think the best thing I would suggest is to go on the Perfume Society website, where I've reviewed loads and loads and loads of different books. There's hundreds to choose from there. There's a really brilliant one by Mandy Aftel that's just come out, which she's got a museum of really unusual ingredients. So if you're interested in the ingredients, she describes them really beautifully, how she uses them in fragrance. She's a perfumer in America. But yeah, there's absolutely loads, but I think it depends what you're looking for, really. So if you want something really nerdy, there's millions of books out there. Some of them are just completely mad. One that I would really recommend that everyone gets, because I just think it's so bloody enjoyable, is called Nosedive. It's by Harold, I can't remember his second name, but if you look up Nosedive, it's basically an encyclopedia of smells, and it does get really, really nerdy, but I think it's a good one to dip into, because it says, you know, why do some things smell like cucumber and they're not cucumber? What are they sharing? And then you can look up perfume ingredients that you see that have long, weird chemical names and think, oh yeah, but it smells like cucumber and melon. Or it smells like donuts and it exists in nature. I think he does a really brilliant job of sort of demystifying the smells of the universe and how we are guided by our sense of smell, basically.
I'll add that one to my story graph.
I,
I've not done that one.
I would insist that anybody who doesn't have any books on perfumery buys Perfumes A to Z by Tanya Sanchez and Luca Turin, because I don't think it's not just, in my opinion, the most enjoyable perfume book. It's one of the most enjoyable books ever. It's so beautifully and elegantly written. It's quite bitchy, it's funny, it's salacious, it's kind of abstract, it's interesting, it's so readable. You can put it next to your loo, like it's just so easy. It's quite sort of arch and sophisticated while being totally accessible and fun. And I think it's a really, really good book. If you're trying to catch the bug of talking about fragrance, it's an absolute joy.
Amazing, thank you. Another question then is, when translating fragrances, do you have a specific collection of words, phrases, or terms for an audience? Alice, do you have anything that you kind of, you know, do you have a list that you want to kind of tick off when you're talking, or does it just come really naturally to you?
Nothing comes naturally. Like it's all practice. It's practice getting to those words quicker, really, over the years. I go to texture quite a lot, whether something's kind of creamy and ambrosial, or dry and sort of dry and powdery, or damp and milky, that sort of thing. I try to find the textures quite quickly. That tends to help me sort of set the picture in my mind. And temperature as well, whether something's hot, cold, warm, icy, biting, that sort of thing. A lot of the time it's, again, how I feel about it, but not in such a personal way. I try and think, how is this going to make somebody feel? Is it cozy? Is it comforting and enveloping and nurturing and nourishing? And is it going to make somebody feel like they're being sort of smothered in body lotion and like really cozy? I try and imagine the sensorial texture, how it would fit onto somebody's skin. That tends to be where my mind goes. But the words just, I mean, they just come like a wrecking ball, or not at all. So depends how the day goes.
Amazing, I love that. We're going to do one more question before I let you all carry on with your day then. It's about the British perfumery industry and your thoughts on where it's growing, what you want to see. Sally, is there anything that you hope will happen here in the UK in terms of developments in fragrance and our understanding of fragrance? What are you looking forward to seeing?
I think there is a loosening up. I mean, it sounds so mad to say this to people because the fragrance world is so bonkers, but I think there's a loosening up on the snobbery around having had to be in grass, for example. So there was a real thing in perfumery that's lasted, I mean, centuries really, where it's almost like you're not proper mafia if you're not from Sicily. If you're merely Italian, you're not a made guy. You must be from the old country. And it's a little bit like that in fragrance, and has been for a very long time. It's like it's not enough to be French and aristocratic. You must have a base in grass. You know, you must get your ingredients in grass. You must have trained there. And thank goodness that is changing. It's not changing fast enough. There are loads and loads of female perfumers now, but there are very, very few commercial perfumers of color. For example, class is a huge problem in perfumery because everybody is someone's daughter or someone's son, or their granddad was a master perfumer or whatever. That is really taking a long time to change. But I do think that all of those things have a much better chance of changing if people from a mixed group are talking about perfume. It's still considered a really kind of rarefied world. I mentioned wine. I think there are lots of parallels between wine and fragrance. And so the more normal people or people from mixed heritage, mixed social class, mixed background are talking about fragrance, the more companies will understand the importance of reflecting that in their product. And that's what I'd really, really like to see. I'm buoyed by the return of kind of little boutique-y sort of retailers. I'm excited by that. I'm excited by the new Liberty Fragrance Hall. You know, there are lots of things happening that are encouraging, but I think the single most important thing that should happen is that people should feel less scared of involving themselves in fragrance. It is a world that kind of lets you know it doesn't want you in, but actually it needs you in.
Absolutely. That's such a great place, I think, to end our panel discussion. Thank you all so much to our amazing 2023 Jasmine Award winners. Incredible insight into how we can translate and talk about smells effectively. From the Fragrance Foundation UK, it's a very exciting time as National Fragrance Week starts on Monday, and there's a whole host of amazing activity going on, and you can find out about events on our website. We'll be posting on our socials, so stay tuned on those spaces. And then in terms of the awards and Jasmine Awards, we'll be announcing the finalists the week commencing the 25th of March. So wishing all the entries into that the best of luck. And we are really excited to continue the celebrations of fragrance. So just stay tuned. There's lots coming up. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope you all have a fabulous rest of your day.